We will tie this all together in just a moment, but first, this question: have you ever met a climate change denier? I never have. I'm in my 70s. I've never met anybody who says the climate isn't changing because everybody knows the climate is supposed to change. Or they should know it's supposed to change. If they don't, then I guess they're woke or whatever. I don't know what their problem is. But the reason we bring this up is the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, announced that his city is going to sue 6 major oil companies and the American Petroleum Institute because the allegation is that they funded and planned a campaign of climate change denial. And that directly affects the city's residents, voters, residents, whatever you want to call them. What do we take away from this? Well, you got to understand that, over the centuries, there have been scores, maybe hundreds of predictions that Jesus was going to come. And they were all wrong, every single one of them. There was one just a few years ago, 2011, I think. Major prediction. Okay, we've had the same thing with climate change, going to destroy the planet or something like that. So that points me to believe that woke leftism, is a religion because this is a component of religion. It's an ideology, but it has religious tones to it. Let's take a look at some of these. Now, I'm going to leave some of them out because I just didn't think of them. You're bound to think of some that I missed. So here's what I came up with. They said that the polar bears are all going to die. That hasn't happened yet. They said that there was a hole in the ozone layer, and it's our fault. I haven't heard about the hole in the ozone layer for at least 10 years. I haven't bothered to Google it, but in the major news, haven't seen anything. What about the melting ice caps? Every time somebody mentions the melting ice caps, they talk about the rising sea levels and how some poverty-stricken islands out in the middle of the Pacific are going to drown and kill all those poor people, and they're going to have to relocate somewhere else, as if the woke left cares about people migrating. Seems like they want people to migrate. They ought to be in favor of that. But the Obamas bought a multi-million-dollar estate on the ocean. Now, they are either climate change deniers. I guess you can be a climate change denier, but or they're just really bad business people. I mean, if the ocean is going to rise because of melting ice caps, and they just spent millions of dollars on this luxury estate, they're going to lose their money. That real estate's going to be worthless. As far as I know, all the real estate everywhere, oceanfront prices are increasing. I mean, millions of dollars. Wherever you go, most everywhere you go, millions of dollars for a chunk of land on the ocean. That doesn't make sense. All right, what about, do you remember the acid rain thing? And all of a sudden, acid rain just went away. I'll tell you why acid rain went away. And I'll tell you why the polar bears didn't die. And I'll tell you why the ice caps didn't melt. It is because we stopped using aerosol cans. Good job. See, we're doing it. I'm being facetious, but I actually heard somebody say that. That's why I bring that up. But then they had this thing called a forest fire. When was that? Last summer? And blew all this smoke down our direction. Did we get any restitution, any justice out of that? I mean, that was an environmental catastrophe. Well, actually, it wasn't. Forest fires are supposed to happen. They actually help the environment. People don't understand that. When I say people, I'm saying woke people don't understand that. Do you remember, and this is a big one, do you remember the fear-mongering over the population explosion? We've got to quit making babies because the more babies, the more pollution. You don't hear about that anymore, and I'll tell you why. Because the population is exploding due to what they term immigration. I call it uninvited guests coming into the country, climbing over the wall. They're not supposed to do that. That's illegal. All right, so we have all these false alarms, but we also have disinformation because they keep referring to climate change deniers. That is a misnomer. There are no climate change deniers. None. At least I've never met one. Now, there may be somebody who's just kind of wacky that, no, the climate isn't changing, or maybe he's ignorant or whatever, but yeah, the climate changes. It always has. Everybody knows it. That's not an issue. The issue is the impact of humanity that humanity is having on the environment. Does humanity have an impact on the environment? Yes, we do. When a cow farts, does it affect the environment? Yes, it does. When buffaloes fart, do they affect the environment? Yes, they do. When Joe Biden farts, does he affect the environment? Yes, he does. Guy needs to put a plug in that thing. Well, maybe not. He probably wound up putting somebody's eye out. But disinformation, just the very term climate change denier, is a lie. And here's another thing. Create a crisis. And by the way, when I make mistakes doing videos, I don't stop and fix them. I just, it's like we're having a conversation. But create a crisis like, the thing at the border. I hate to call it immigration because that lends a tone of legitimacy to it. These are people who are uninvited guests. That's the nicest term I could come up with. They create a crisis like that one, or like climate change. And then what do? They blame someone else. Now, the crisis at the border is very real. Climate change, it's not that real. I mean, yeah, climate change is genuine, but blaming free market economies on destroying the environment, no, I don't think so. That doesn't work. I mean, if you take an ice cube and you drop it into the ocean, does that affect the overall temperature of every ocean everywhere? To some scintilla of a degree, it changes it, but it's insignificant. Now, do humans contribute to climate change? The answer is, to some degree. And we're not even sure it's a bad thing. And by the way, you see, they got these studies. Yeah. Did you take debate in high school, college? One thing that you learned in debate is whatever your position is, you can find a study somewhere that supports it. So yeah, there are studies out there that support that humans are contributing dramatically to climate change and the outcome is bad. It's never good. It always has to be a bad outcome. But there are other studies that say, no, these people are just making this stuff up. So pick your study, But you got to keep in mind that the woke left has a motive for advocating the climate change scare. Well, one of those motives is it puts a lockdown or gives them an opportunity to control free markets, to control the economy. Do you know what you call it when the government controls the economy, controls businesses? I mean, businesses aren't owned by the business, but they're controlled by the government, but they're controlled by the government. There's a term for that. It's called fascism. These people say they are Antifa. They're not Antifa. If you want to see somebody who's anti-fascist, Antifa, real Antifa, go back to D-Day, Normandy Beach. Those were anti-fascists. The Americans, the British who stormed Normandy. That's a real Antifa. A little bit off topic there. All right, so you create a crisis. Here is what Mayor Johnson said. There is no justice without accountability. I'll go along with that. Then he goes on and he says, from the unprecedented poor air quality that we experienced last summer to the basement flooding that our residents on the west side experienced, as if there's never ever been any basement flooding in world history, the consequences of this crisis are severe, as the cost of surviving them. Keyword, cost. Did you catch it? That is why we are seeking to hold these defendants accountable. It's all about money. Okay, if your basement floods, it's because of climate change. It doesn't matter that basements have always been flooding. If we have a tornado, it's because of climate change. Or it's a sign that Jesus is coming. Now, when people say, my dear Christian friends say there was an earthquake and that's a sign that Jesus is coming, which is, by the way, not in the Bible. The Bible says there will be earthquakes, but it doesn't say that that is a sign necessarily, or an increase of earthquakes will not be a sign. But that's the way they frame it. And what I asked them then, well, if there are no earthquakes, does that mean Jesus isn't coming? So if your basement isn't flooding, does that mean there is no climate change crisis? They've got to have it one way. Okay, you can argue with that if you want, but whatever. So they want to hold these defendants accountable because they want money. Acid rain went away because it was never there in the first place, as far as I know. And if it was there, why isn't it still here? Maybe you have an explanation. Maybe the woke left has an explanation. They got a study. I guarantee you. They got a study that explains all that somewhere. But it's all about payout pandering. All right, now let's take all that and let's tie it all together. This is about fear mongering, and it's about making us worry and fret. I will worry when the climate stops changing. I want the climate to change. It's supposed to change. There have been times in history where climate change has been severe, where it was wintertime all summer long. We've had those experiences, we being the human race. Not a comfortable thing, but it wasn't because free market enterprise was polluting the atmosphere. But if that were to happen today, and it could, it's the crisis pandering. Now, we've heard stories of, during the age of exploration, where Europeans would go to previously uncontacted tribes, and they would tell them, the Europeans knowing that there was an eclipse about to happen, and they would tell the uncontacted tribes who were unaware of that, they're going to make the sun hidden if they don't do what they tell them to do. I don't remember the details of the story, but what happened was this is a perfectly natural phenomenon. They were exploiting that to terrify these tribal people, and it worked. Well, it doesn't work anymore because now the tribal people know better. Go to, any one of those tribes, if they still exist, and say, hey, we're going to have an eclipse if you don't do what I tell you to do. And they'll just say, hey, you're an idiot. You know why? Because they came to their senses. They're now educated. They know better. Same thing is true with climate change. It's like an eclipse. It happens. Don't use it to scare us. It's like some rigid fundamentalists trying to use hellfire to scare people into heaven. Scare them to give up their money. And I'm not saying all hellfire preachers do that, but some of them do. There's a long history of it. And that seems to be the bottom line of all these scare tactics, is controlling people and wrenching money out of whoever has it, which is the government, which doesn't. What are we, $30 trillion in debt now? They don't have it. Where are they going to get it? From us, taxpayers. What do you call that when you take from the rich and give to the poor? That's not Robin Hoodism, that's Marxism. What Robin Hood did is he stole from the greedy government. The guys like Mayor Brandon, and he gave to the people who really needed it. Why doesn't Brandon Johnson fork over some cash out of his pocket? I'm sure he probably makes a good six-figure income. I don't know what his income is, but I'm guessing he makes more than the people whose basements are flooding, so maybe he can help him out. Oh, he didn't cause it, though. We caused it. The oil companies caused it. Now, they're setting a precedent. If he gets away with this, every city in the country, every town, we're going to see the oil companies as cash cows. And what are the oil companies going to have to do? They're going to have to raise their prices to make a profit. That's the way we're heading. If you got something out of this video, join our family by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to share this on social media because that helps a lot. And what did I leave out of here? is there something that you could think of that I forgot? Some of these false alarms I'm talking about, you probably know some. So start a conversation, join the conversation, or just leave a comment, whatever, and we'd like to get your feedback. See y'all next time.